looking to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On today's headlines. First, in Malaysia, Ramon Magsaysay, the wife of former Prime Minister Najib Razak, arrived at a court in Kuala Lumpur where she will face verdict on her corruption trial, days after her husband was jailed for graft. Super Typhoon Henry slightly intensified, Pag-asa said. The Super Typhoon or Tropical Depression Gardo, both of them may possibly merge in the next few days. President Marcos Jr. said his administration is committed to raising the profile and improving the working conditions of nurses here and abroad. The G20 climate talks in Bali ended without a joint communique, despite most host Indonesia warning the world's leading economies they must act together to combat a warming planet or risk plunging into uncharted territory. First, in Malaysia, Ramon Magsaysay, the wife of former Prime Minister Najib Razak, arrived at a court in Kuala Lumpur where she will face verdict on her corruption trial. And this is just days after her husband was jailed for graft. According to Channel News Asia, Ramon Magsaysay has filed an application at the High Court seeking the removal of the judge who heard her corruption case. Malaysia Kenny, meanwhile, reported that in her application filed at the High Court, Rosma contended that she has lost faith in the judge's ability to hear her corruption case following the recent alleged leak of a judgment that purportedly pronounced her guilty in the matter. Rosma is facing 3 charges of soliciting and receiving bribes totaling 194 million ringgit or 43 million US dollars linked to a 1.25 billion ringgit solar energy project for schools in Sarawak. Extreme weather news. Japan's weather agency said a very strong typhoon, the Hinamnor, was nearing several remote southern islands, prompting warnings for local residents to seek shelter before it becomes too dangerous. This week, Typhoon Hinamnor developed into the most powerful tropical cyclone recorded on Earth so far this year. AccuWeather meteorologists warned that the typhoon will cause life-threatening flooding, destructive wind gusts as high as 185 miles per hour, and disruptions to the energy and commerce sectors across the southern islands of Japan and parts of South Korea. According to AccuWeather, as of early Thursday morning, local time, the typhoon had 1-minute sustained winds of 115 kilometers per hour or 185 kilometers per hour, equivalent to a Category 4 major hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale in the Atlantic and East Pacific basins. Wind gusts were estimated to be 165 miles per hour or 265 kilometers per hour. Satellite imagery showed that the storm had a well-defined eye, as you can see here. Okinawa flights have already been disrupted by the storm. Japan Airlines canceled flights to and from the region, while ANA Holdings said 8 flights have been scrubbed through Thursday. Both companies warned that depending on the course of the typhoon, flights could be affected throughout this week. Hinamnor is the strongest global storm this year and is barreling towards the East China Sea. Japan is currently in typhoon season and is hit by around 20 such storms a year, routinely seeing heavy rains that cause landslides or flash floods. Staying here in the country, Super Typhoon Henry or Hinamnor slightly intensified, but no tropical wind signal was hoisted in any part of the country as of Thursday morning. Pag-asa said Super Typhoon Hinamnor and Tropical Depression Gardo may possibly merge in the next few days. Let's take a look.
Itong kaulapan na ito ng Gardo ngayon ay sumasama na dito sa sirkulasyon ng Super Typhoon Henry na kumikilos pa rin ngayon dito sa loob ng ating Philippine Area of Responsibility. At bahagya itong lumakas, naging 195 kilometers per malapit sa gitna at pagbugso na 240 kilometers per hour. Bahagya itong lumakas dahil natapos na yung tinatawag natin na I-will replacement cycle wherein dinadaanan talaga ito ng stage ng isang malakas na bagyo at inaasahan natin na possible pa na ma-maintain na itong kanyang intensity within the next 24 hours. Makikita natin, meron tayong mga habagat signature clouds dito sa may bahagi ng Bicol region, some parts of Mimaropa, Metro Manila, and the Calabarzon area. So ngayon ay inaasahan natin dahil hindi naman malapit itong bagyo dito sa atin, ay magkakaroon pa rin tayo ng maulap na papawirin na may mga kalat-kalat na pag-ulan at pagkulog. So may mga pag-ulan over dito sa Central Luzon down to the Visayas area, dala na yan ng enhancement ng habagat. Ngunit, hindi ito tulad ng typical habagat natin na tuloy-tuloy na pag-ulan. So, enhanced thunderstorm ang ating inaasahan dito. Kaya may mga pag-ulan mula ngayon hanggang weekend. Ito yung mga binabantayan natin dito sa mga pag-ulan over the Luzon and Visayas area. Still, nakikita pa rin natin no, na as of 8 a.m., nandito na sa loob ng ating PAR. Then kagabi nga pumasok na, then makikita natin na maglulup pa rin to o mag-stationary. So ito kasi yung binabantayan natin dahil base sa ating analysis, once tumigil na yung pagbaba ng bagyong Henry, ito na yung time na bubuelo na siya pataas. So ngayon ito yung critical point. Kapag ito ay sumobra pambaba, posible na natin maapektuhan talaga hanggang dito sa may Babuyan area. So sa ngayon nakikita natin na Batanes area yung may mga potential na magkaroon tayo ng signal within the day. And makita natin, after niyang kanyang pagpreno, pipihit na to panorte at kikilos nga ng generally northward direction, papalabas ng ating area of responsibility. Base sa ating forecast track, Sunday, lalabas ng area of responsibility ng bagyong Henry. So ano yung ina-expect natin for the rainfall? So late afternoon hanggang mamayang gabi, may light to moderate with at times heavy rains na dyan sa Batanes area. Samantalang moderate to heavy, mas malakas na pag-ulan o mas malalakas na ulan ang inaasahan natin sa Batanes and Babuyan Island habang lumalapit pababa itong bagyong si Henry. Then by Saturday early morning, may moderate to heavy rains na lang sa Batanes and light to moderate with at times heavy rains naman sa Babuyan Island. So makikita natin, yung ulan na direktang dala ng bagyo ay mararanasan lamang dito sa extreme northern Luzon. So ito yung binabantayan natin in terms of ulan, pero may mga pag-ulan pa rin tayo. Enhanced thunderstorm, inuulit natin, over the Luzon area and western Visayas, dala pa rin niya ng habagat na nahihila nitong bagyong si Henry. Inaasahan nga natin, base doon sa ating forecast track, no, so kikilis pa rito pa southwest, then babagal, magkakaroon siya ng either stationary or quasi-looping, ibig sabihin, mag-recurve, iikot ang bahagya, bubuelo yung bagyo bago ito kumilos pa norte. Then, expected to exit our area of responsibility on Saturday evening or Sunday morning. So, over the weekend, ng pagmamonitor natin dito sa Super Typhoon Henry na nasa loob ng ating area of responsibility. So Ricardo po, no, naging low pressure area na siya. Ito kasi yung stage na dadaanan niya from tropical depression, ihina to low pressure area. Kanina ng alas 8 nangyari yon. Then ngayon, nakikita natin yung kaulapan. Itong cloud signature, yung remnants ng bagyong Gardo, ay sumasama na doon sa ikot ng bagyong si Henry. Initially, ganito lang si Henry. Pero since nga sumasama na yung naiwang ulap ni Gardo, ay nagiging malawak na yung sakop ng bagyo. So nakikita natin, nagkakaroon na ng extension yan at itong ang paghatak ng habagat on this side ay nagiging enhanced na dahil dito sa bagyong Henry. Personal experience ko rin dito sa Pag-asa, first time ko rin nagmamonitor ng pasubsob na bagyo. Mayroon tayong mga nangyayari before dito, pero ito kasi nangyari galing sa taas, Southern Japan, sumubsob siya papasok ng ating area of responsibility. So medyo unique. Pero in terms of location, during this time of the year, usual naman ito. Pero yung enhancement ng habagat ay magdedepende pa rin yan kung walang ibang weather system. So dahil nga sumubsob to, dahil meron tayong nakikitang high pressure system sa norte ng bagyo, so yun din yung reason kung bakit na itutulak yung southwest palayo. Kaya hindi rin ganun kalakas na ulan yung inaasahan natin. Ngunit, tulad ng sinabi natin, enhanced thunderstorm, pwede siya maging mas matagal na thunderstorm na merong moderate to heavy rains.
To Pakistan now, where a town named Bahrain is now a town in ruins, reduced to rubble by the incredible force of flash floods that swelled the river running through it, severing a lifeline bridge. Hundreds of settlements in Pakistan's north have been cut off by monsoon rains that came to a head last week, causing the worst floods in the country's history. Take a look.
अभी तो सब खंडर खंडर नजर आता है। पहले तो इस तरह नहीं था सर। पहले तो चेयर पेयर मेहमान बहुत ज़्यादा जितो भी आंदे थे, ये तो कलाम। अभी तो ये तो बस खंडर खंडर ही बन गए। जो घर जाते हैं लोग उनको भी मुश्किलात है। जो मरीज है तो आंदे वो तो भी मसला है। ये तो कल से जो पुल मुल बन गए ना, थोड़े थोड़े आर्मी पहुंच गई ना, तो उन्होंने पुल मुल बना दिए, लोग आना जाना शुरू हो गए। पहले तो कुछ था भी नहीं।
वो गया जी दरिया में गया, फिर वो दूसरी की बारी आई। थोड़ा सा गाँव था ना सामने हमारा, वो जी उस पर जोर आ गया, पानी का जोर समझ। हाँ जी, उस पर जोर आ गया, देखते देखते वो ही गिर गया। उसके बाद दूसरी की बारी आई, देखते देखते वो ही गिर गया। तकरीबन एक आधा घंटे के दरमियान सारा वो गाँव खत्म।
Hotels have disappeared, the town's mosque a bare shell, and waist-high water still gushes through the main bazaar. The town usually bustles with more than 1,000 summer tourists every day, drawn by majestic mountain views from hotels and restaurants perched on the riverbank. It'll likely take years for them to return, and with tourists gone, the fear of economic ruin is also setting in. Many locals reported not receiving any warnings, but as the river rapidly rose, tourists began to evacuate from hotels. Like in many riverside villages and towns, locals believe only the homes on the banks were vulnerable. The army arrived on Wednesday, local residents said, to oversee the chaos of diggers clearing rubble and to manage the flow of foot traffic across the river. Helicopters fly overhead, dropping food packages to the stranded valleys. And the World Health Organization has given the flooding in Pakistan a grade 3 emergency rating, its highest level.
Pakistan was already facing health threats, including COVID-19, cholera, typhoid, measles, leishmaniasis, HIV, and polio. Now the flooding has led to new outbreaks of diarrheal diseases, skin infections, respiratory tract infections, malaria, dengue, and more. WHO has classified the flooding in Pakistan as a grade 3 emergency, the highest level, which means all 3 levels of the organization are involved in the response: the country and regional offices and headquarters. We're releasing $10 million from the WHO Contingency Fund for Emergencies, which is supporting our work to treat the injured, deliver supplies to health facilities, and prevent the spread of infectious diseases. Floods in Pakistan, drought and famine in the Greater Horn of Africa, and more frequent and intense cyclones in the Pacific and Caribbean all point to the urgent need for action against existential threat of climate change.
While it's too early to quantify the contribution of warming, scientists are saying the rains are broadly consistent with expectations that climate change will make the Indian monsoon wetter. The UN chief has called them a climate catastrophe. Pressures are mounting for UN negotiations in November to ring-fence specific loss and damage funding for countries slammed by increasingly extreme and expensive climate impacts. The issue will be thrown into sharp relief, with Pakistan fronting the important G77 plus China bloc, representing more than 100 nations and a significant proportion of the global population as it reels from weather disasters. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif calls the flooding in Pakistan the worst in the country's history during a media briefing in Islamabad as aid efforts ramped up across the country to help tens of millions of people.
And I can say without any fear of contradiction that this flood situation is probably the worst in the history of Pakistan. The damage to our infrastructure, is very vast and is spread all over Pakistan at my command, that every penny will be spent in a very transparent fashion. Every penny will reach the needy. There will be no waste at all.
Meanwhile, according to NPR news agency, international aid was reaching Pakistan on Monday as the military and volunteers desperately tried to evacuate many thousands stranded by widespread flooding. Cargo planes from Turkey and the United Arab Emirates began the international rush to assist impoverished nation, landing on Sunday in Islamabad carrying tents, food, and other daily necessities. The UN is trying to raise $160 million for humanitarian relief, but that money is for people in immediate crisis, and there is no guarantee it will come. In a related news, no Filipino was injured in the massive floodings in Pakistan that killed more than 1,100 since mid-June. According to the DFA yesterday, the Philippine Embassy in Islamabad continues to monitor the situation and stands ready to assist distressed Filipinos. Embassy Chargé d'Affaires Maria Agnes Cervantes, in a statement, said the Philippine Embassy in Islamabad is in touch with the Filipino leaders and the Filipino community in Pakistan. Pakistan has endured torrential monsoon rains since June, triggering severe flooding that already affected an estimated 33 million people. Of the death toll, over 350 are children. According to the UN, more than 500,000 people were displaced, nearly 1 million homes damaged. To date, at least 72 districts across Pakistan have been declared calamity hit, a number expected to increase as rain continues to pour in the country. The Group of 20 or G20 climate talks in Bali, Indonesia ended without a joint communique, despite the host, Indonesia, warning the world's leading economies they must act together to combat a warming climate or risk plunging into uncharted territory. The failure to agree a unified statement came at the end of a month in which more than 1,100 people died in Pakistan from flooding blamed on climate change and after a drought exacerbated by a record heat wave across half of China. Take a look.
Even as we are gathered on this beautiful island, we cannot hide from the fact that the world is facing increasingly compounding challenges such as population growth, water crisis, resource scarcity, energy insecurity, as well as environmental degradation.
Alongside this ongoing crisis are the growing threats of climate change, biodiversity loss, and land and ocean pollution. These environmental stresses impose additional burdens on the poorest and most vulnerable who have done little to create global environmental problems and whose development aspirations remain unfulfilled.
Reiterate that the Italian government continue to condemn the Russian aggression against Ukraine. I would also like to stress that the grave consequences that war is having on the environment, on food and energy security, on our pandemic recovery efforts, and on our pursuit of sustainable development goals.
A source close to the meeting said G20 members did not manage to reach a joint communique, and most countries started their speeches by condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine, though there were no walkouts or clashes when the Russian representative spoke. Moscow only sent a deputy minister for economic development to the talks, according to a list of attendees seen by AFP. At the meeting were U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry, Britain's Climate Minister Alok Sharma, and officials from India, Australia, Italy, Brazil, Japan, South Korea, and the European Union, among others. China, the world's biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, only sent a Vice Minister of Ecology and Environment, with higher-level officials staying home because of the pandemic. The meeting was a prelude to a November Leaders Summit, which Indonesian President Joko Widodo has said Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin will attend, despite Moscow's isolation after invading Ukraine. President Bongbong Marcos Jr. today said his administration is committed to raising the profile and improving the working conditions of nurses here and abroad. He made this commitment in a speech during his attendance at the 100th anniversary celebration of the Philippine Nurses Association at the Manila Hotel. Marcos praised and expressed gratitude for the sacrifices and contributions of all Filipino nurses. Let's listen in.
Ladies and gentlemen, and idadagdag ko, my heroes, ang ating mga na hindi lamang tumulong sa mga naging pasyente ng COVID dito sa Pilipinas, kundi rin pinaganda nyo pa ang pangalan ng Pilipinas dahil sa serbisyo ninyo sa buong mundo. I think I am correct when I say, no other country can boast of such a strong and capable nurses who are known not just for competence and dedication to this very noble calling of healthcare, but for their compassion and kindness. Diyan na iba talaga ang ating mga nurse. Marami namang magaling diyan, marami namang ngunit ang kahit yung mga foreigner, hinahanap nila, mas gusto nila na ang nag-aalaga sa kanila mga Pilipino na nurse. At hindi naman kataka-taka dahil kapag inalagaan ka ng Pilipino na nurse, gagaling ka talaga. For exceptional care, your government will continue to pursue the programs that support the continuous development of Filipino nurses. Among these is the Nursing Certification Program, which strengthens and certifies our nurses' competencies in various specialty areas. We also have the Primary Care Worker Certification Program that provides eligibility requirements, standard competencies, training mechanisms, and certification processes that ensure competent and quality staffing for our healthcare system. It is also this government's position to support the leadership development courses for public health nurses, which aims to capacitate nurses to provide quality health services and become skilled leaders and managers. The government also offers the in-service postgraduate scholarship program to continually enhance our nurses' competencies through formal education. There is also the e-learning program, which provides access to free continuing professional development, accredited courses in many disciplines of study. Certainly, we will not stop with just providing programs that improve your capacity as nurses. We will continue to provide you with the benefits that you deserve as healthcare workers. As of 19 August of this year, the government has disbursed a total of 25.82 billion pesos worth of benefits to our healthcare workers, especially our nurses. These include hazard duty pay, COVID-19 sickness and death compensation, meals, accommodation, and transportation allowances, life insurance, special risk allowance, and the one COVID-19 allowance. Please know, sa palagay ko, kulang pa yan eh. Medyo hirap tayo sa pondo ngayon. Kaya sa ngayon, ganyan lang muna. Pero palagay ko, binubuhay nyo yung may sakit eh. Ibang usapan yan. Walang mahirap lagyan ng balor, ng dolyar, ng piso, yung trabahong ginagawa ninyo. Dahil yung sakripisyo ninyo, hindi lamang kayo nag-aalaga ng mga pasyente, kung hindi, nung panahon na, nung kabigatan ng COVID, nung 2020-2021, kayo'y pumapasok pa rin kahit alam ninyo na high risk ang inyong trabaho, sige pa rin. At marami sa inyo ay talagang tinamaan. Marami sa healthcare workers ay nawala.
He also noted that his office is always open to dialogue to address the issues concerning nurses and allied healthcare professionals. The president also promised to open more slots to the deployment of nurses abroad while striving to improve domestic opportunities. In tonight's other news, police said at least 10 people, including 4 young children, were killed and more than 20 injured when a truck plowed into a bus stop outside a school in a city adjacent to Indonesia's capital. The truck was transporting iron bars in Bekasi, West Java at around 10 a.m. when the driver lost control and the vehicle crashed into a bus shelter where a group of students were gathering. Police said at least 23 others, including 14 primary school students, were injured and taken to 2 nearby hospitals for treatment. Images from the scene of the crash showed twisted metal and debris as rescuers were helping the victims. Police said they were still investigating the cause of the crash. The driver had been detained but had not been questioned because he was still in shock. Thai police are hunting a YouTube dancer nicknamed Nati, who swindled millions of dollars from her followers using a foreign exchange trading scam. Take a look. Natamon Kongchak, 29 years old, who also uses the aliases Leia and Suchata, has a following of nearly 850,000 on the video sharing platform. Local media reported there could be up to 6,000 victims who lost up to 55 million US dollars after being promised 35% investment returns. So far, 102 victims have filed complaints to authorities totaling 30 million baht or $825,000, according to Thailand's Cybercrime Investigation Bureau Deputy Superintendent of Investigations, Watana Ketumpai. Police allege that Nati advertised her personal wealth on social media platforms to dupe victims into thinking that she got rich quick from foreign exchange trading. Police said this scam is similar to other Ponzi schemes, but the differences are public relations and deceptive methods. In her last Instagram post from May 25, she apologized to the victims and promised to pay the money back. She said, "I'm sorry that I have troubled and disappointed many people. I want to apologize for this incident from the bottom of my heart." AFP contacted Nati for comment, but she has not responded. Meanwhile, Vietnam announced it would free almost 2,500 prisoners ahead of the country's independence anniversary. But the amnesty will be smaller than in recent years and exclude activists.
Khác với những lần đặc xá trước, quyết định về đặc xá lần này đã có những quy định chặt chẽ hơn về điều kiện được đề nghị đặc xá và các trường hợp không đề nghị đặc xá. Do đó, số phạm nhân được đặc xá lần này cũng ít hơn so với các lần đặc xá trước đây.
Chủ tịch nước đã quyết định ân giảm xuống tù chung thân cho 10 bị án, trong đó có 2 phạm nhân là người nước ngoài, gồm 1 phạm nhân có quốc tịch ở Nam Phi và 1 phạm nhân có quốc tịch ở Lào.
Now, those sentenced for propaganda against the state or attempting to overthrow the communist regime, a charge frequently leveled at activists, will not be released, according to the official amnesty announcement. The mass pardon is one of the smallest in recent years due to tighter regulations on amnesties, according to Pam Tanha, deputy chairperson of the president's office. In 2015, more than 18,000 were freed, while last year the figure was 3,000. The country typically never releases activists. 16 foreign nationals from Australia, France, Nigeria, Laos, China, Canada, Cambodia, the U.S., and Malaysia are among those who will be freed from today, and Independence Day is Friday. Around 750 foreigners are serving jail terms in Vietnam, according to the Public Security Ministry. Human Rights Watch says more than 150 political prisoners are behind bars in communist Vietnam as of March this year, and the country has a reputation reputation for leveling harsh punishments against government critics and dissidents. The Southeast Asian country bans all independent media outlets and is ranked 174th out of 180 countries in the Reporters Without Borders 2022 Press Freedom Index. Back here in the country, the Marcos administration will study the proposed joint oil exploration between the Philippines and China in the resource-rich West Philippine Sea. Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles said the Department of Foreign Affairs will look into the proposal to jointly explore energy resources in the WPS.
Pag-aaralan po natin sa ngayon. Sa mga foreign relations natin, lalo-lalo na those involving contracts, kailangan pa po ng abiso ng ating Department of Foreign Affairs.
Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Wang Shilian, on July 27 said China is ready to restart talks on oil and gas exploration with the Philippines. In November 2018, the two countries signed a memorandum of understanding on joint oil and gas development in the West Philippine Sea. The Philippines, under the Duterte administration, terminated the talks before Marcos assumed presidency on June 30 because of constitutional constraints and issues on the country's sovereignty. The Philippines on July 12, 2016 won its petition against China before the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, Netherlands, after the court invalidated Beijing's supposedly historic rights over nearly the entire South China Sea, including the West Philippine Sea. Despite the Philippines' historic win, China has repeatedly ignored the 2016 ruling. A Cambodian psychiatrist treating victims of the Khmer Rouge and a French environmentalist cleaning up Indonesian rivers were among the winners of the 2022 Ramon Magsaysay Award, considered Asia's Nobel Prize. The foundation that runs the award named 4 winners in an online announcement. Among them was Sutheria Chim, 54, a psychiatrist and survivor of the murderous ultra-Maoist Khmer Rouge regime that killed nearly a quarter of Cambodia's population through starvation, overwork, and mass executions in the 70s. Take a look.
Actually, I never expect to do the work to receive the award. And the award comes with the surprise. So I think it's very, very important for me, for my organizations, and I think in particular also for Cambodia to receive this prestigious award, which it's not easy to work with trauma survivor, to listen to the trauma story of the people, as it's reminded me a lot about the trauma I suffer myself under the Khmer Rouge when I was young. But the more I work with these people, I found that it helped me. So it's a kind of catharsis that I have the chance to understand the feeling, the suffering of the survivor, as well as a chance that I can reflect on the suffering I have. So I feel that the more I help people, it heals myself too. I never want to be a psychiatrist. I always dream to become an architect, and I want to be a